My name is Laurelee, and this is It's Not About Food. So it's not about food, and it's not about weight. What is it about? Everything else, because it's never ever about food or weight. Never ever, not even one time, not ever, ever, ever. Hello, everyone. Today we are talking about spirituality. And the card is the goddess is holding the sun over her head, and the little deer dog person is sort of looking up at her. And there's a lot of beautiful sunlight coming through this beautiful sun that she's holding. And the card is just very nurturing and sort of nature-like. And in the back of the card, it says, at the heart of every person is a yearning from the deepest part of our souls that must be heard. It is a desire to awaken, embrace our whole selves, and see past the limitations we have put on ourselves. It is the knowing that we are connected with a universal love and a spiritual presence that holds the flame of our true essence of love and light. When we begin to accept that each one of us was born with divine spirit, then we can stop the struggle with defining ourselves as good or bad by our body size or the food we eat. We can then move on to simply expressing our true selves. And how different is that idea of spirituality than what a lot of us were sort of raised on? At least for me, I was raised on a very hierarchical sort of spirituality where there's me, and then there's many layers of other people or beings or spirits, and then the very top. And I could not really get to that top person or top being. I had to go through other things to get there. And so that left me kind of alone and lonely at the bottom here. So when I got the idea at some point in my recovery that I had it in my heart, I had it in my gut or in my self, this divinity, that was so opening for me and kind of scary even, really, because then there was no guidance except for myself, which I didn't have a really great opinion about myself. So I also want to say that for me, one of the biggest things about my eating disorder was it was trying to get my attention to listen to my spirituality, to listen to my divinity, to listen to myself, to listen to this spiritual presence within myself. And I didn't really know that until I had been in recovery for a little while. But that's what it really was for me, is me trying to get me to listen to me. And today I can't think of another person more suited to have this talk with than my guest is Debbie Glander. And we are in the beautiful Davis, California. And I'm going to let her introduce herself, and then we'll have a talk about spirituality.
Great. Thanks, Laurelee. I'm super excited to be in this conversation with you today.
Yes, me too.
I couldn't think of someone that I was looking forward more to having a talk on spirituality, because I know we have a lot of similarities in our past, and
sisters from a different mother.
Exactly. And I always enjoy when we get to connect. It's really interesting because there was a time in my life, some years back, that this would have been the last topic and the last card I would have ever chosen out of your body. Ever.
Right.
Ever. I would have taken any other card than this one. So I think that speaks to a spiritual moment.
Yes, it does. Well, I know for me, I wrote these cards and developed these cards with my wonderful business partner, Carol Normandy, who I wrote It's Not About Food and Over It with as well. And we both started Beyond Hunger. But I hate this subject of spirituality and sexuality. And I always made her talk about it because I don't want to. But here we are. And I'm actually kind of okay with it.
Yeah, I was listening to your podcast that was done so beautifully by, I think, Erica on sexuality.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that, and I was just kind of chuckling because I'm like, the two hardest and probably two that go really well together.
Yes. Who would have thought that in my childhood? Yeah. Never in a million years would I have thought that.
Exactly. Yeah. Same here. So, yeah, it's interesting because one of the things I really love about your work is how you talk about it's not about food. And when you and I were talking previously, that just really spoke to me.
Yes.
Because my eating disorder started when I was like 14, and it had absolutely nothing to do about food, my shape, body size,
wow,
clothes I wore at all.
Right.
It all stemmed from being raised in a high control group, of religious trauma, spiritual abuse, and it was the only thing I had any power or control over.
Yes.
So the two really, for me, went hand in hand. And,
so true.
I have a lot of different names for what I call the disorder because of it being the anger disorder, the control disorder, different names, but it was really the only thing. And so when you speak to it's not about food, it's so true.
Yes.
It was just trying to have some kind of control over my life.
Something. Give me something.
Right.
And what better one than, I'm going to eat the way I want to.
Exactly.
You can't make me eat another way.
Yeah, you're telling me everything else, the way I have to think, how I have to act, who I can hang with, what I can believe, what I can't believe, and you can't control this.
Yeah.
Which, obviously didn't serve me very well, but I did feel like I had some power at that point.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting how this has transitioned from being something so beautiful.
So tell me how you sort of got yourself out of that eating disorder and then got yourself to a spiritual place about it.
Yeah,
I'm sure it
definitely
was
definitely a long path, and I'm continuing on that path. For me, luckily, I was actually able to be removed from the household where basically I was being raised in a cult that was very controlling, and it was a religious organization that was very had cult behaviors. So I was able to move out of that household from living with my dad to my mom. So I, didn't have at that time any longer. I didn't have the extreme, religious control and abuse and the dogma of the religion. But just because you leave the household doesn't mean you leave the belief system, right?
Of course, right.
And so the eating disorder was still there. It wasn't quite as bad. I would switch to other things like alcohol or perfectionism or different things like that. I still needed something to try to kind of numb out because the feelings were hard to have. And to be able to describe what had happened with the religious abuse was even hard to put words to.
Yes.
So I didn't really embrace spirituality for a long time after that. And it wasn't until I was a little older. I don't know if you want me to move forward on it. Okay.
Please,
so
please.
I wouldn't go into churches. They were something very traumatizing for me.
Yes.
If there was a wedding, I would go, but I really was like full of anxiety and fear because it was all about fear-based.
Exactly.
And so it wasn't until I was a young mother. I had 2 young kids, and my daughter was 5, and we were on a vacation, and we went to Puerto Vallarta, and we were doing a excursion of some of the different buildings, and there was a couple of churches. And my daughter, innocent, she's 5, and so she walks right into one of these churches. And so I followed, and my son kind of stayed outside. And not that we had ever talked negative about churches or religion, but there was just no talk at all about it in my house. So my daughter goes in, and this was just a really, really like spiritual awakening moment for me. And I would say it was probably the first that I was recognizing.
Beautiful.
She walks in, and it's beautiful. The sun is coming in, the stained glass windows. It's warm. It just kind of has that historic church look.
Yes, of course, yes.
And she sits down, and she's looking around, and she goes, "Mom, I think I feel God in here."
Oh.
Just pure, completely pure.
How old?
She was 5.
Oh.
There was no coercion, all the things that I think of when the
Yes.
punishing God word was used.
Yes.
No coercion, no control, no manipulation.
Just only love.
Just only love. And
Beautiful.
I just had that moment of like surrender. Like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. If this beautiful essence
Yeah.
of love can feel that.
Right.
There's something that I
so
need to have a
beautiful.
perspective.
It's
shift
so
and change.
true. I got sober when my son was 9. And I remember, I was a single mom, so I took him with me to meetings a lot of times, and he was in the back of the room coloring or doing his homework or whatever he was doing. And he would stand up and we would say the Lord's Prayer at the end. And I thought at that moment, I said it just like I say it, like anything else that I know by heart. And I realized he had never been taught it. But he didn't care. He just was holding hands with everybody else, just being in the circle. And the same kind of thing. I went,
beautiful.
oh, he has no bad connotations with this or anything about this.
Yes.
And I feel like AA was what gave me my spirituality back, because it was a God as you understand God, which my understanding of God before that was really not good for me. Not good for me. And I'm the same way. I can go in and out of churches, and I don't have this fear and panic that I used to have when I was younger.
Oh, exactly.
Like I'm doing something wrong. Oh my
I'm
God.
in trouble.
What am I doing?
Yes,
Right.
exactly. I'm bad. I'm in trouble.
Right. My
Yeah.
skirt's too tight. My shirt's too small. My
Exactly.
hair is not good.
They can
I
read
look-
my mind.
Right. They can read everything I do.
Everything I do. Right. The demons might possess me. Yeah. Yeah. It was bad.
Yeah.
I think I had a similar experience to you too. About my mid-30s, I also was exposed to this 12-step program, and it was probably the first time since being taken out of this high control group that there was some thoughts and talks of God and higher power, and and step 11, prayer and meditation, right? And I was like, oh, I like this idea of meditating, and I think that is probably when I had
Yes.
that shift. It was about the same time this happened, with like these few things, which I'm now calling spiritual awakenings, moments that I was able to be present, pay attention, and be able to be still and be present and let that spiritual experience happen.
So, you bring up a good point that people ask me about when I say the spiritual connection within ourselves, and that when they try to fit a 12-step program or a religious teaching or something, and it seems to not really go hand in hand or hand to glove. And, there's that part, say like in a 12-step program, where they say, surrender to God your character defects, which I have a big problem with that
I do too.
that whole sentence right there. And then, wait a minute,
Shame.
and shame. And wait, let's reframe this, or let's do something different than that. And that I can remember being in OA before I got solid recovery, and it was just, I would sort of give my food to God, if you will, and then it wouldn't work. I would still be overeating, or I would still be chintzy on food, or I would still be so upset about my weight. And I thought, well, I gave it to God, and God's not taking it, so it's God's fault, or some kind of bullshit like that.
Right.
But I know that for me, when I finally stopped giving it outside of myself and said, I love me, and so let me eat in a way that shows me that I love me. And I didn't even know what that would mean.
Right.
But it wasn't giving it up to something, and it wasn't saying I had a character defect, and it wasn't saying I was sabotaging, or, I was just struggling with my own stuff and trying to find my way.
Exactly. Yeah.
And how do you work with that, especially with people who are coming in with severe problems with spirituality that was not good for them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I just get really curious about what their experience was. And I'm really also careful the wording I use, because I do work a lot with people that are coming out of cults and some that are religious cults. And they're not really ready yet, possibly, to use that phrase, because it's such a shattering and a dysregulation and deconstruction of everything that they have believed for so much of their life. And so I just really listen to what the pain they're bringing in. And, a lot of times it does get connected through kind of our getting to know each other better and building trust. It does get connected to ways that it was acted out on their bodies through, through food, whether it was like myself, through it was control of restricting or binging, and the feeling of never being enough. And I think also, which a lot of the high control groups do, is that you're bad. And you're just always trying to hustle.
Right.
And you can't. You can never be good enough.
We can never be perfect.
You can never be perfect. And so there's no sense of what I believe spirituality is that connection with ourselves at this deep level that and we're all connected by some higher power. I don't know what that is for each person. Goddess, God, higher power, nature. Fishing, I don't know, whatever it can be, universe, whatever it might be. And that it's rooted in this intrinsic desire for us to be connected and feel like we belong. And I think that's what is missing so much in some of these dogmatic groups, and some how people are raised religiously. And it may not even have to be that. It could be the family dynamics that keeps us from really truly believing that we have this intrinsic spiritual goodness in ourselves, that true essence.
Which is a lot of times so much different than this, mark against our very souls just because we were born.
Exactly. Right.
Or just, well, you're human, so you're bad, and you're just going to have to accept that and go from there.
Exactly.
Like, well, wait a minute, I didn't have any alternative, ulterior motive when I came, to the operating room with my mom.
Exactly. So automatically these limitations are put on us, right? By others, and then we put them on ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's when we get so far from spirituality. I think the opposite is what we're talking about in regards to behaviors around eating disorders.
That's right.
If I can fit in, if I can be accepted and get approval by the size of jeans I wear, or the weight the good food I'm eating, and it's so far from what the spirituality piece is about us, the connectedness and that belonging, and really practicing that love for others and for self.
Yes. Well, if you think about the cult of thinness, or the cult of the diet, or the cult of the perfect food, like don't eat this, don't eat that, don't eat this. It's the same kind of thing.
Totally.
Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Yep. And then you have to go to these meetings and confess your sins of what you did that week. Or maybe you were really, really good, so you get a gold star closer to heaven, the heaven of the... the
top
skinny
of the,
jeans.
Right, exactly. The smallest size. Or, and the
it's,
best Instagram pictures. Yeah.
Yes, and it seems like it's very much similar. Many, many books are written on how to do it right, and what would be how you're supposed to, and that you have to do it forever and ever and ever until you die. So that cult of whatever the cult is, whether the cult is, your weight or your food or your spirituality or how you're supposed to be as a woman or how you're supposed to be as a person, or it just gets so crazy, and we're chasing that stick that we'll never, ever, ever get.
Exactly. And I do love that you're talking about it. It carries over in so many different places. It really does. And even some of the religious groups have particular diets.
Absolutely.
Foods that are okay and not okay.
That's right. And I've had people coming up to me, talking about the book or whatever, saying, well, I go to a church group and, I just don't seem to be able to lose any weight. And I'm trying really hard and I pray every day. And I'm thinking, oh my God, read my book.
Right.
Please give that up.
I know.
Have your God, whatever. But don't push these together,
And
Come
then
from love.
Right. And then it's going to, like we talked earlier, how the spirituality and sexuality do get so intertwined because it's going to affect.
Yes.
I find I can't even think of an exception. Every one of my clients, whether male or female, if there has been a lack of spirituality, and to the extent of where there's been religious trauma or spiritual abuse, it definitely affects our belief that we also are good sexual beings.
Exactly.
That really, I think, gets damaged.
Yeah.
Also, which then affects the body image and the good and bad food and what we can control.
Well, if you go back in time of, religious teachings of that, the body is the animal or and must be controlled and must be taught how to not, be crazy.
Be crazy, go out, get out of control.
Right.
Exactly.
Or some people have to wear, covering from head to toe with just like a little slit for their eyes because the men will go crazy if they see them or,
Yeah.
It's so like, what?
It is really, and I would say it's interesting because how my practice started was mainly focusing on eating disorders. So I'd get clients in that was kind of their identified issue they wanted to deal with. And as we would do more, right behind it would be there was some kind of religious trauma and then some sexual trauma or just sexual lack of development.
Yes.
It all went together. And then years later, I start doing more spiritual abuse work, and I'm running a spiritual abuse recovery group now.
Probably as you got more recovery for yourself.
Exactly. Yeah, I wasn't ready to do that sooner. Because
Right,
I think
of
the
course.
spiritual abuse sometimes is some of the deepest, most intrinsic damaging, because it's really about that core self
Exactly.
being bad.
Being bad. Yeah.
And those clients, as we're coming in talking about their cult experience, religious trauma, there's half of them have issues with their eating disorders and their
What
body
a
image. And
surprise.
I know. It's like
Shocked.
all goes together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
Which was my story. So it's like, oh, okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. I
Right.
wasn't the only one.
It's like the onion, you keep peeling
Exactly.
it. And I have clients that say, I don't want to be doing this forever. I just want to be done with it. It's like, well, I think you have to die.
Exactly. It goes on.
As long as you're
Exactly.
alive, you're going to have
Exactly.
stuff come up.
Exactly.
Just go with it,
And it's so beautiful when we can be more aware as we get more developed. I'm going to say older, but it doesn't always have to be age. But I know for me, it's been as I get older.
Mature, maybe.
Mature, right. And having these spiritual awakening moments now that I can see what they are versus just, oh, this good thing happened. And I had one with my therapist not too long ago that it was just this moment of this spiritual feeling of being able to finally kind of surrender to and let go of something I've been hanging on to for a long time.
Yes.
And we both were able to tear up. And to me, that was that connected spiritual belonging moment.
So beautiful.
Yeah. That had nothing to do with what size I was or,
Exactly.
what I ate. It's about
Right.
that moment together.
Right.
And that's what I try to share with clients is those are the moments that are really about practicing your spirituality.
I just got back from Spain where I did parts of the Camino. And I remember walking, so the end of the Camino is the church in Santiago. And so walking up to the church, I saw all these other pilgrims, coming in with their backpacks, and they were hugging each other, and we were all high-fiving. You knew another pilgrim because of the way they just looked like they had done a wonderful journey, if you will. And I was tearing up so much. And what was weird is I wasn't tearing up that I had just done this. I was tearing up that all these people had just done this.
Yes.
Like they all went on a journey. They all went on a path. They all,
The
for
connection.
whatever reason, were drawn to this thing and did it. Sometimes, like I met a man from Switzerland, the day after he retired, he walked out his front door in Switzerland and walked to Santiago, Spain, and
That's amazing.
75 years old.
Wow.
And so I just was so proud of all of us.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, yeah, but I did this too. Oh, yeah, I forgot that part.
Right.
Because I was so into, oh, my God, this is so great. And the whole town is all about that. And just it was a beautiful experience, but
Right.
exactly like
Exactly,
that.
right.
And I, as a little girl sitting in St. George looking at this huge eye that followed us around the whole church, I would have never thought that would be where I would be when I was older. You know,
Isn't it
that would
amazing?
be
Never.
the whole
Yes.
spiritual part about
Exactly.
that.
And to be able to, and not all for all people, but I know for me, really being able to separate the religious
Yes.
organization.
Yes.
Which a lot of religions can also be spiritual. I get
Of
that.
course.
But that was not my experience, and a lot of my clients did not have the experience. But to separate that there's spirituality,
Yes,
it is separate and different.
that's right. And
That
it comes
is hard-
from
yeah.
whatever.
Right. And we're all
Yes.
born with that inherent spiritual
Yes.
goodness of self.
Which, again, I was never taught something like that.
Never.
Was not going to be me getting that. It was somebody else had to give it to me, or I had to work for it. Or I don't know what would happen.
Right. Exactly. Had to be a
Yeah.
certain size for it or whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
Wear your hair a certain way.
Right. Exactly.
That's too much lipstick. You don't get to go to God. Sorry.
Exactly. Wearing the wrong thing.
Right.
Yeah. Never that we were just born with it.
Right.
And
right.
and it also would help us trust ourselves.
Yes.
That was definitely
and that
diminished
was
too.
another thing. Don't trust yourself. Look what happens to you. You're just willy-nilly.
Exactly. The others need to tell us
Yeah.
that hierarchy,
Yeah.
telling us how to be, what to think. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Debbie, I am so glad to have this time with you and talk about this very important subject. But hopefully, I don't know, I want to lighten this stuff up so that it's not so heavy and it's not so hard to talk about, because we have to do it. We have to talk about this kind of stuff.
I totally agree.
So I'm wondering if you would read the Just for Today.
Yeah, definitely. So on the spirituality card, the Just for Today, today I will practice reminding myself that my spiritual self is who I really am. When I find myself obsessing about my food or weight, I will take a deep breath, be still, and listen to my deepest yearnings and guidance. It's really beautiful.
Oh, thank you so
That's
much.
beautiful. Thank you, and thanks for this beautiful card.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. And be sure and follow me on Patreon, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and itsnotaboutfood.com. Thanks.